Hey class, we are just rolling right along through our chapter 34, discussing the evolution of vertebrate animals. We talked about a lot of our fish in the last video. We went from our osteichthyans and our chondrichthyans, so our fish that have cartilage for skeletons and our fish that have bone for skeletons. We got into the difference between ray-finned fish and lobe-finned fish. And we even got into some lungfish that are able to kind of gulp air. And now we're going to start moving into animals that left the water to come onto land. So this ability to have the fins of the lobe fins evolve into the limbs and feet of tetrapods was a pretty significant event in our history. So you can see these pectoral and pelvic fins as they developed those muscles in the lobe fins, then that led the way to creating 4 legs for our tetrapods. And once the tetrapods moved onto the land, they started diversifying a lot. The specific adaptations we see in our tetrapods to allow colonization of land are 4 limbs. So instead of having pelvic and pectoral fins, we have 4 limbs, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they have feet with digits. That means fingers and toes. They developed a neck, and that neck allowed the head to move separately from the rest of the body. The pelvic girdle and backbone fused. Gills, for the most part, became absent. You might see a tadpole that has gills, but for the most part, our living on land means that we are breathing the air and we're not using gills. And we develop ears to detect airborne sound. So which of these would you consider the most recent common ancestor of the living tetrapods? Would it be A, a sturdy-finned, shallow water lobe fin, whose appendages had skeletal support similar to those of terrestrial vertebrates? Would it be B, an armor-jawed placoderm with 2 pairs of appendages? Would it be C, an early ray-finned fish that developed bony skeletal supports in its paired fins? Or would it be D, a salamander that had legs supported by bony skeleton, but moved with the side-to-side bending typical of fishes? The tetrapod body plan was most likely a modification of that body plan of lobe fins. And you had a homework assignment over TIktaalik. This is a fossil nicknamed fishapod. So this fossil had characteristics both of fish and tetrapods, and is an example of a transitional animal along that evolutionary pathway of fish turning into tetrapods. So the fish characteristics we saw in TIktaalik, it had fins, it had gills, it had lungs, and it had scales. But it also had tetrapod characteristics, so it had ribs that allowed it to breathe air and supported its body. It had neck and shoulders that allowed its head to move. It had front fins with a bone pattern of tetrapod limbs. It had a pelvis and rear fin that were larger and robust, more robust than those found in fish. This video was part of your homework. If you haven't completed it, please do make sure you go watch it. It is 17 minutes long. I know it's a long one, but it is really, really good. It's one of my favorite videos that we watched this semester. So when we're watching this, thinking about TIktaalik, it's likely that it could prop itself up on its fins, and it's likely that it could walk around in the water, but it's not very likely that it actually left the water and walked onto land. But through studying fossils like TIktaalik, we can actually reconstruct the evolutionary pattern of tetrapod limbs from fish. We can actually see how, these fish fins turned into eventually the hands that we see with fingers and digits. Tetrapods first appeared about 365 million years ago, so that would be right at this mark. And they diversified rapidly over the following 60 million years. So you should now be able to describe the origin of tetrapods and tell me some of their key derived traits. The first ones that we have here when we're looking at our tetrapods, the first clade we're looking at are amphibians. There are about 6,150 species of amphibians in 3 different clades. The salamanders, which are in order Urodela, that means tailed ones. You can see they have a tail. Frogs, which are in order Anura, So that A tells you they are without tails. Frogs don't have tails. And then the caecilians, which are in order Apoda, which stands for legless ones. You can see this guy doesn't have a leg. So our first order, Urodela, were our salamanders and our newts. These are amphibians that have tails. Some of them are aquatic, and they can live on land as adults or throughout their life. And they exhibit paedomorphosis, or the retention of juvenile features in sexually mature organisms. I'm going to pull up this video. I'm going to pause while I pull it up. Okay, our next order are Anura, which are the animals that lack tails. These amphibians are frogs and toads. They do have powerful hind legs that allow them to move across land. And the difference between a frog and a toad is if it has a leathery skin, it's called a toad. Okay, I'm going to pause you again while I pull up this video. I'll see you in just a second. Okay, next we have order Apoda. These are the caecilians. There's about 170 species of caecilians. They look a lot like earthworms, but they are in fact an amphibian. They are legless and they are nearly blind. Although they did evolve from a legged ancestor, but they evolved to have legs, and then further evolution, they lost their legs. And they inhabit moist forest soils in tropical areas. We probably won't see one around here. Okay, one more video. Okay, so our amphibians, that word amphibian means, pause. Okay, the word amphibian, amphi means both and bio means life. So that word amphibian means both ways of life. That is a reference to their different stages of life, that many frog species spend time as a juvenile, as a tadpole in the water, and then as adults in the land. So the larval stage of a frog is an aquatic herbivore. It has gills, a lateral line system, and a long fin tail. During metamorphosis, the tadpole develops lungs, it develops legs, and it develops eardrums. It also adapts to a carnivorous digestive system. It also develops a carnivorous digestive system. Many amphibians are strictly aquatic or strictly terrestrial, although most of them are going to be found in damp habitats. Most of them have moist skin, and as you heard in one of those videos we just watched, their skin complements their lungs and gas exchange. So they're not only breathing through their lungs, they're also able to breathe through their skin. Fertilization is external in most species, as you saw, and the eggs do require a moist environment. In some species, like in this picture, the males or females will care for the eggs on their back. They also may care for their eggs in their mouth or in their stomach. A lot of vertebrate diversity, more than we see in other organisms. Okay, one more video here.
From the slimiest frog to the tiniest toad, to the larvae which go by the name tadpoles, to the caecilians that wiggle in their holes, to the giant salamanders that grow and grow. Most lay eggs, their blood runs cold, but they're not lizards, no, no, no. The amphibians, 7,000 kinds of amphibians. Stomp your feet, clap your hands, 7,000 kinds of amphibians. Pippa hatches larvae in its back. Rhinoderma rufum holds them in its vocal sac. Eurecia susorum, external gills on its head. Discothus antongilii is tomato-like and red. Most lay eggs, their blood runs cold. They're not lizards, no, no, no. The amphibians, 7,000 kinds of amphibians. Stomp your feet, clap your hands, 7,000 kinds of amphibians. A Treticolina icehelp doesn't have any lungs. Rhinophrynus dorsalis has a funny tongue. Anodontyla montana, always ready for a climb. Blethodon glutinos is synonymous with slime. Most lay eggs, their blood runs cold, but they're not lizards, no, no, no. The amphibians, 7,000 kinds of amphibians. Stomp your feet, clap your hands, 7,000 kinds of amphibians. Amphibians, 7,000 kinds of amphibians.
That's a fun one. Okay, so a question for you. Some amphibians never leave waters. Others can survive on relatively dry terrestrial environments. So what is the difference in their lifestyles that facilitate those? Or what different adaptations do they have that facilitate those different lifestyles? Then there's a global problem with amphibian decline. So a lot of amphibians around the world are dying off. There's a rapid worldwide decline of amphibian populations that's been documented since about the 1990s. Some different causes. One is a disease causing chytrid fungus. The fungus just grows on their skin and it reduces their ability to breathe. One is habitat loss. So a lot of areas where the amphibians have been living are being used by humans, and the amphibians aren't able to live there anymore. Climate change, making the weather and climate inhospitable to them, and pollution. 9 species have become extinct over the last 40 years, and 100 species, that's a lot, have not been observed over these past 40 years and may also be extinct. Okay, I will see you back in our next video. We're going to talk about our amniotes, and then we'll talk about our mammals, and then we'll talk about people, and that's our chapter. So I'll see you back for our next one to talk about our amniotes. Bye.